Despite the congested accommodation Ambedkar's family had in Bombay, first in Dabak Chawl and then in the Bombay Improvements Trust Chawl, surrounded by the labor area and the underworld, young Bhim pursued his studies diligently, often sleeping in the company of goats, reading in public parks and under street lamps. Once, when Bhimrao was asked by the teacher to solve an example on the board, the panic-stricken Savarna boys scrambled first to remove their tiffin boxes from behind the blackboard to prevent them from being polluted. Turn in any direction you like. Caste is the monster that crosses your path. You cannot have political reforms unless you kill this monster. Ambedkar was married immediately after his success in the matriculation examination in the Baikala public vegetable market. The age of the groom, 17 years, and the bride Ramai, 9 years. Education continued. Graduation, he served the progressive-minded Maharaja of Baroda, Sayaji Rao Gaikwad, who provided Ambedkar with a scholarship to go abroad. Before he set sail, Ambedkar lost his father. Then on to the United States of America, the land of liberty and equality, the land of Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, to pursue higher studies. Columbia University, New York. To begin with, he stayed at the Hartley Hall, the university dormitory, but the food did not suit him, and so he shifted to the Cosmopolitan Club, 114th Street, where most Indian students stayed. And then at the Livingston Hall dormitory, with a kind and very helpful Parsi friend and admirer, Naval Bhatena. Political science, moral philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and economics were his subjects of interest in Columbia, where he could quench his thirst for knowledge in the libraries rich with books. Ambedkar had a passion for knowledge and an obsession with books. Above all, he knew he must study hard to fight his battles back at home. He drove himself to keep a punishing schedule, foregoing all the comforts, spending all of his time in libraries, burning the midnight oil. Often he sustained himself on a loaf of bread and a cup of coffee. He had to save a considerable amount from his paltry scholarship to remit money to his family in India. Eleanor Zelliot, a noted scholar of Ambedkar's writings and Dalit literature, says,
1913-1916 were Columbia's glory days. It was the most distinguished center of learning, I think, in America. He studied with many distinguished teachers. Perhaps the most famous is John Dewey, America's best-known educator. Pragmatic, in love with democracy, a world traveler, Ambedkar remembered John Dewey all his life, and at the end of his life used to imitate his teaching style. He even quoted Dewey. Dewey said, "Every society gets encumbered with what is trivial, with deadwood from the past, with what is perverse. Society must not conserve everything, but only the things that make for a better future." and that was Dr. Ambedkar's philosophy. He studied with Edwin Seligman, a very distinguished economist and a very kind man. And what did he get in America? What did he learn from being in New York? I think he learned to have faith in democracy. New York was growing, New York was exciting, New York was dangerous. New York had Italians and Irish, and the American Negro, as it was called then, was coming up into this area. Ambedkar saw many, many peoples living together and a democracy that worked. Not only was he taught that by John Dewey, but I think he could see it in the structure of New York itself, a faith in democracy that never left him. I think he learned about race here. I think he could see that the black people, the Negro people, as they were called at that time, the people of color, were separate, had a separate church. The Abyssinian Baptist Church, a pure black church, is very near here. And he alone, of all the untouchable leaders, said, we are not a separate race. We are not a separate race. We must be treated distinctly in order to join all other Indians. And I think that fear of being thought to be permanently separate may have come from his New York experience.
Professor Ainsley T. Embry, Columbia University, an Indologist of repute, says,
when Ambedkar came to Columbia in the years before the First World War, the dominant intellectual influence here was represented by John Dewey. John Dewey's ideas in education were extraordinarily influential. He regarded education as basically concerned with creating democracy. He was very strongly against the old idea of education as perpetuating tradition. He was convinced that what had gone wrong with Europe was an emphasis on transmitting the past. And his argument was that we should give to children only what will be useful to them, only what will help them lead better lives. So to him, education and democracy were inseparable. Now, along with this was an enormous emphasis on equality. Now, this again is part of the dominant ideas of the United States in those years. There was a great deal of anti-European feeling. And it's interesting, some of Ambedkar's early writings, his academic writings.
In 1915, Ambedkar was awarded a master's degree for his thesis, Ancient Indian Commerce. His paper, Castes in India, was acknowledged as the first scientific analysis of the barbaric social structure in India. The first salvo in a terrible war he waged throughout his life. Soon after this, he was awarded the Doctor of Philosophy degree for his thesis, The Evolution of Provincial Finance in British India. From USA to the London School of Economics for advanced studies, and also putting in terms at Gray's Inn for law. But his scholarship remuneration had run out. Despite his efforts, Ambedkar go back at Baroda State on the insistence of the